The 2017 Doklam crisis, which played out between China and India in a part of Bhutan located just east of Sikkim, appears to have shifted China's strategic objectives with China more than doubling its total number of air bases, air defense positions and heliports near the Indian border over the past 3 years. Now, those are details of the Chinese expansion accessed by NDTV, which was spelt out in a report by Stratfor, a leading global geopolitical intelligence platform which has been released a short while back. Now, the report outlines China's military infrastructure build-up through a detailed analysis of satellite images of military facilities that have a direct bearing on India's security. In fact, the three images, the areas that you are seeing over here prominently marked out, are air bases which are being developed. Some of them may have been historic air bases, but they are being developed since 2017 to add to China's ability to bring air power into this region. Now, the timing of the Chinese buildup of military facilities along the border with India just prior to the ongoing Ladakh standoff suggests that these border tensions are part of a much larger effort by China to assert control over its border region. Now, this is one of the areas that you actually saw over there where the Chinese have actually built up an air base. There are 3 or 4 images that we are going to run through over here before we go across to Sim Tack. He's the author of this report in Stratfor to understand the geopolitical significance of what it is that we are actually looking at. Now, this is important. Nagari Gunsa, it's located just 200 kilometers from Pangong Lake. This image earlier on in the month of May. But the next image that you will see is of that same site in the month of September, where there is a considerable amount of development which has taken place. Now, if we take the next image, which is side by side, you can actually try and see the differences which have taken place. And the final image, if we can just take a look at that, is of a heliport which has been developed by the Chinese in the area. So let's go across now to Sim Tack. Thanks very much, Sim, for being with us. We've been speaking now for the last couple of days, and it's great to have you on the show and talking to us. What does your research indicate of the Chinese development along the India frontier since Doklam?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that question, please?
From 2017 to now, what does the build-up along the India frontier indicate?
So essentially what we have seen is that the development of Chinese military infrastructure, which was of course already taking place to some degree before the Doklam crisis, has essentially seen an acceleration after the Doklam crisis, and particularly in the last 2 years, during 2019 and 2020, we've seen
all right, we'll come back to Sim Tack in a moment from now. We've lost that line with him. But let me go back to Rishika for the moment for more news. And all right, Sim is back. So let's just go back to Sim. Sim, we lost your line. So let's just, I'll just come back to my top question, which was this. Since 2017 to now, what are the changes that you've seen on the frontier between China and India?
So the primary changes are a lot of new facilities. We're talking about new air bases, new air defense sites. And in addition to those brand new facilities, we're seeing consistent upgrades of nearly all of the existing infrastructure that China has had on the Indian border in the past.
Okay, so let's in fact take this image full screen. Now, these are images which have been tweeted out by Stratfor, an expert at satellite imagery who both Sim Tack and I have worked with, and these point to 3 or 4 important areas: Nagari Gunsa, Gerze, Keria and Damsung. So let's roll the next image and let's get Sim Tack to speak a little bit about this. So this is the Damsung area. Let's talk a little bit about this. Sim, what exactly have the Chinese done in this particular area in terms of airfield construction?
So this airfield is actually one that China had not been actively using for a long time. But then as of last year, I believe October 2019, we started to see construction activity at the airfield. And it appears now that China has been constructing a second runway, which of course massively increases the capabilities of this airfield, able to support deployments of additional aircraft, have those aircraft take off faster in case of emergency. And this is similar to what we've seen China do at air bases all along the Indian border.
Okay, let's bring up the next image. The next image is of Keria in the Xinjiang district of China. That's the airfield. And it's interesting because the runway length is 3,000 meters. Elsewhere, we've even seen 5,000 meter or 5 kilometer runways being created. Now, this is important because the longer the runway, the easier it is for China to operate a lot of their aircraft. And the advantage which many in India felt that India had, because our planes are operating from a lower altitude, could perhaps be sorted out by the Chinese if they have longer runways.
Indeed, when you're operating at higher altitudes, that additional runway length definitely helps you with heavier aircraft. So either aircraft carrying more ammunition, or especially when we also think about the logistical efforts of military pressure, not just the fighter aircraft, but these longer runways will allow very heavy transport aircraft to deploy equipment and troops into the area as soon as China would need them.
So let's turn to the next image. The next image is of Nagari Gunsa. Now that's actually just 200 odd kilometers from Pangong Lake. And this image is of earlier on. This image was of May, when there was a little bit of work which had started. Let's go to the next image. The next image actually shows you a lot more work which has taken place. The presence of fighter aircraft has been reported over here. Nagari Gunsa, how important is that in terms of the tactical air power balance in eastern Ladakh?
So Nagari Gunsa is one of the main airports that we look at when it comes to Chinese power projection in Ladakh or Aksai Chin. The work that has been done at Nagari Gunsa also very directly reflects China's intent to use this airbase more in the support of its actual fighter aircraft and that direct projection of fighter power. So one of the notable things here is the construction of hardened aircraft shelters, which effectively allow China to better maintain the aircraft at this base. They create specific spaces in which they can conduct that maintenance. And in addition to that, of course, the shelters will obscure the visibility of deployments at these air bases. So in the past, we've been able to see the Chinese aircraft lined up at these air bases on the tarmac. But once these shelters are finished and start to house aircraft, through satellite imagery, for example, we won't be able to tell exactly how many aircraft China has in each base. And this will help China to adjust its position without necessarily alerting or informing India.
Sim, let's go to the last image we have. This is in the Gerze County in the Nagari Prefecture, where we've got an image of in fact, let's go to the next one. The next image is of Gerze County in the Nagari Prefecture of China, which is a heliport. And this can't be stressed enough, that the deployment of helicopters in this area is an incredible force multiplier in terms of supporting soldiers on the ground along the line of actual control. Would you agree, Sim?
Indeed. Helicopters perform a lot of really important duties. We're not just talking about transport of troops, which of course adds a lot of capability because of the complex situation in the mountainous terrain, which makes mobility difficult. But in addition to that, helicopters also provide surveillance capability and even some limited attack capabilities. And the heliports have actually been one of the more notable elements of this Chinese infrastructure drive. And we've seen a lot of these facilities constructed along the Indian border, and especially since the beginning of the Ladakh crisis, we've seen 4 of these entirely new facilities appear. And these are facilities that China is going to exploit to the fullest. And that can also be seen, for example, through its continued acquisitions of new helicopters from Russia. For example, just recently, people were talking about the new Mi-17 SH helicopters that China will be buying from Russia, and is actually going to some Chinese military units that have been involved in exercises near Ladakh. So we wouldn't be surprised to actually see those appear in some of these heliports that China is still constructing right now.
And would you agree that what's happening now in Ladakh is part of a larger strategy which we've seen from China in the South China Seas as well? The pressure being brought on India right now is part of a larger scheme. What is that?
Exactly. I think that is the big takeaway from all of these individual tactical observations that we've made. All of this shows through the timing, through the geographic spread of these activities, that for China, the Ladakh crisis is not just a short-term dispute over a small fragment of its border with India, but that all of this is part of a much larger coordinated effort for China to increase its military capabilities towards India that will support it in future border disputes, future standoffs with India. And you mentioned the South China Sea, of course, where China has been conducting a similar strategy over a longer time. And the combination of these two along, the South China Sea and China's western border with India kind of shows how China, from a position of strength, is trying to limit its exposure to external threats and to reinforce its own territorial claims all around.
All right, Sim Tack, thank you very, very much for speaking to us and sharing that report, which actually spells out in clear-cut terms how in 3 years the Chinese, operating on the basis of a plan, have brought pressure to bear across the frontier between India and China, a manifestation of which can be seen along the line of control in terms of soldiers on the ground. But the air power situation is so very critical in terms of the Chinese infrastructure build-up. Thanks very much for joining us.